I need to bring that forward now. Maybe apply some of those principles of my memories to what's going on for me now and make some changes to adjust. That's the wisdom this can bring to an ESFJ, as an example. Now, I'm not saying everybody's got that same experience. I'm just saying I think that's the way this can like actually show up to help you curate your life as you go forward, which then now opens up channels to go, I love myself because I'm not putting myself in the position of all these one-sided relationships where people are taking from me and I just have to go serve. I actually have thought about the type of people I want to surround myself, the people that matter based on my history. I feel good. I feel a sense of self-love. Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So we are nearing the end of our series, 16-part series, talking about all of the Myers-Briggs personality types, how they can show themselves love. And in this episode this week, we have arrived at the ESFJ personality type. And we're going to talk about, if you're an ESFJ, this is going to be a great episode for you because you're going to learn a lot about your type. And we're going to go into a lot of detail around this with the lens or the framework of how do you show yourself love as an ESFJ. And if you're not an ESFJ, but you have an ESFJ in your life or you just want to know more about this type, I think you're going to learn a lot as well today. And at the end of the episode, like we've been doing on this series, we're also going to give everyone, all the other 15 types, a takeaway, something you can learn from ESFJ's self-love that you can apply in your own life. And so stay tuned for that near the end of the episode.
Yep. So we've been, like you said, this has been a series and we're almost to the end. I think we're like 3 away from the very end. This has been a long series.
16 weeks.
No, 17.
17.
I guess, yes, it has been a long series because there are 16 types. But I mean, like,
yeah,
you know, I think there was a lot that went into this series.
Yes.
We did quite a bit of research. We did quite a bit of making sure our notes were all in order.
Yeah.
And so it's been a few months. It's been like, this has been a lot.
when we chose personality types as an ENTP and ENFP, Sisyphus was laughing somewhere in the outer reaches of something, going, aha. Because we thought, oh, that's, but every time you do one thing, you have to replicate it 16 times or 15 more times.
Yeah, every day the boulder rolls down the hill and a new type gets slapped on it, right? That's the Sisyphus conundrum.
Yeah.
It's like the meaning of pushing the boulder up the hill every day, knowing it will inevitably roll back down.
Yes.
It's just every day has a different type.
That's right.
It's been carved into the rock that we're pushing up the hill.
So let's set some frameworks here for this. We have an
not
approach.
To say that this is a bad thing, by the way. Yeah, no, I just want to make it clear. It's not like we're at ESFJ and we're like, man, this has just been grueling. Okay, I guess we're gone this type.
The reason it's relevant is both of our personality types are not equipped for that, like on paper. Like if you went from a type theory standpoint, most people would not put their bet on the two of us being able to do that over and over again and keep landing that in a consistent fashion. That's typically not known for our personality types. So that's why it was relevant for me to bring up.
Well, and I think we do a lot of patting ourselves on the back for being consistent. I think we do a lot of like,
totally unashamed of it too.
And that said, I will say this, all of that wasn't to say this has been grueling and I'm glad we're almost done. I will say all of that said, I can't believe we're finally at the end because it's been a bit of a lift. And now we're at ESFJ, which is actually one of my favorite types. It was my sister's personality type. It's my nephew's personality type. I actually get along with ESFJs very well. So to bring it back to the relevance of this particular episode, I'm very excited.
Okay, I got to jump track one more thing though.
Okay.
We're not at the end.
I know.
We're doing the ENP thing of like, we're almost at the end and you just said we're at the end. So just to the 5-yard line.
5-yard line, close, I can see it.
Close to the end.
I can see the 5. Yeah, I can see the end. I can see the goal. And we're almost there.
We didn't do a lot of nonsense talk before we started recording, so I'm weaving it into the beginning, I suppose, here of the actual episode itself. Because usually I burn all this out before we start.
That's true.
Let's get back to ESFJ, though. Let's talk about the framework. Again, because if you're an ESFJ, I would say ESFJs are probably one of the personality types in Myers-Briggs that this idea of self-love is an instinct, but I think a lot of ESFJs report, I feel like I'm doing a lot of love for other people and I'm sending love out. But I will say, if I really am honest with myself, I think an ESFJ would say to themselves, yeah, I probably struggle with self-love. I probably have a hard time tuning to my needs and making sure I'm okay and getting the things that I need. And sometimes I don't always feel like I have permission to love myself. And I think that's really the meta frame is we have the philosophy that love is freely given and we're always giving it without condition. just like if in a relationship, Antonia, you and I are in a pair bond relationship. We work together. We're also romantic partners and married. Romantic part. We're married. We actually have we even have paperwork to show for it. We have the whole thing. So we're in a relationship, and my love and your love to me is given freely. If I put conditions on that love, I'll love you if you put the toothpaste cap on the toothpaste or fill in whatever parameter I have. That's not really love. That's a conditional love. We're talking about unconditional love that we send to a partner. Now, just like that's unconditional, there are parameters for the relationship itself.
Right.
And ESFJs know this, right? Relationships are not all created equal. You and I have a good relationship. Every time I attempt to send you love, it's usually well received. Sometimes it's on a channel you're like, what? And it doesn't work, right? Because I think all of our signals back and forth are attempts to say, do you love me? And the other person's saying, yes, I love you, through behavior and words and the things we do and say to each other and how we behave. So even though we're trying to attempt to send love, that can be disrupted by a problem in the relationship itself. So we understand this with other people. We'll now just apply that to ourselves. We are trying to send ourselves love without condition all the time. But just like with a relationship with another person, we can have a messed up relationship with ourselves. Mm-hmm. So the signals are messed up. We're not hearing it. We're not hearing our self-love that we're trying to send to ourselves.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about, well, how do we get that in proper order? What is the relationship with ourselves that would be in good standing for us to send that love back and forth?
Yeah. One of the ways we've been saying it in the other episodes is that we're always trying to send ourselves love, but we're not always receiving that love. Mm-hmm. And so a matter of experiencing self-love is removing obstructions, removing anything that's making that channel not clear. And so we can both give ourselves love, which we're trying to do all the time, and we can also receive it. And when you were talking about love being unconditional, I think some people push back on that. They think love is conditional, but I think that's the reason why we've been phrasing it the way we have been, which is it's not earned. Like we can't earn love from each other by putting those conditions on, but we can earn a good relationship. And we've mentioned the example of if you end up, separating from somebody, you're in a good or not good relationship, but you're in maybe a partnership, like a love partnership, and the two of you decide this isn't working out, and so you complete the relationship, even if it was a dirty, sort of battle, even if it was really a bad breakup. Usually we're still, like, even without our own consent, sometimes sending that person love. We still love them, right? We still have a heart for them. But over time, if we're not in constant relationship with them, or if we're not in constant daily interaction, over time, eventually our heart catches up to the logistics, and we might not be sending so much love their direction. We might not be thinking about them so much. But even then, at the end of people's lives, usually they look back and they see significant relationships and they're like, yeah, no, I still love that person, right? So when we say it's unconditional, when we say it's not earned, we're really saying it's not a choice, right? I guess that's maybe the closest. It's like when we love somebody, we can't choose it. We just love them, right? It's happening to us. But when we develop a good relationship, what we do is we foster the conditions or create conditions where that love can flourish.
Yeah.
Where it can be more than just a feeling that's sent. It can be like a generative thing. And I think people who have ESFJ preferences understand these interpersonal dynamics, maybe sometimes better than anybody. It's just that reframe of going, okay, so that thing you understand about relationships between two people, like you mentioned, Joel, now you've got to take those same principles and apply them to the self. And so how does one develop a good relationship with oneself? You earn it. Right?
Yeah.
You earn it by treating yourself well. And I think that's important. And then the final piece that track we've been laying in this series is one of the ways that we clear those signals or remove obstructions to receiving love from that we're sending to ourselves from ourselves is setting appropriate expectations. We have a tendency, I think, to set very uncalibrated expectations for ourselves. And I think it's because nobody really teaches us how to set, mature expectations. And if we expect too much from ourselves in areas that we're just not pre-wired to show up in, then we face a sense of demoralization. Like we keep trying and trying, but we just never quite get there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if we set too low of expectations for ourselves and we know we could be doing more and we know we could be getting more performance out of ourselves, then we're sort of disappointed.
Yeah.
Right? We're disappointed in the fact that we didn't push ourselves further or see what we're made of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
One way to see that is, if I have the expectation at my age and station of life with the physical body that I've been given, that I'm going to be a linebacker in football, like a football team, I'm going to be disappointed by the expectation. Like, it doesn't matter how much I believe it or wish it. Like, if I expect that, I'm probably going to be disappointed. But if I expect myself to be creative and be able to perform and maybe speak, extemporaneously or help organize a room for an experience, that's something I actually am good at. So if I'm not rising to that expectation, I might feel a little diminished and like, well, I could do that. I have capacity for that. Maybe not a linebacker in the NFL, but I could help lead a meeting or a group. So it's also really what we're equipped with aptitude and focus and ability. And that's where personality type enters.
Yep.
ESFJ preferences tell you what you're attuned to. There's going to be things that if you have expectations for, you're going to really erode your ability for self-love because you're going to feel like you're falling short all the time.
Yeah.
But if you put yourself on good footing and you can rise to the expectations that are proper for you and what you're attuned to as an ESFJ, well, now you're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to have self-trust, self-love, all those things coming to you. So when we look at ESFJ, we need to go one layer deeper as well. So ESFJ is where most people start. ESFJ, that speaks to extrovert, sensor, feeler, judger. Those are the words that those letters point to. But really what those four letters point to is the cognitive functions of your mind as an ESFJ. This is how your mind is learning information. These are the functions that are working in your brain to learn information or perceive your world or to evaluate that information or decide upon it of what to do about it. And so that can be complex. Like we've talked to a lot of people, we've been doing this for a long time. And sometimes it's like, wow, it's hard to grasp at first, especially if you're new. So what we've done in the programs we've developed for all the personality types, we've created a program for each one. There's one for ESFJ. It's called the ESFJ Owner's Manual. And we've created a little mental model inside of the ESFJ Owner's Manual in that program. And we're going to pull that piece of content out of the Owner's Manual. We're going to reference it today to help you get a sense of your cognition and how it's laid out. So again, if you have an Owner's Manual for your type, and you can follow along in the same framework regardless of your type, but if you have the ESFJ Owner's Manual, I recommend pulling up that sheet, pause this recording, whatever, get that sheet out to follow along, looking at the cognitive functions of your mind. So, and I'll do a quick overview verbally here, just so if you don't have the Owner's Manual, you don't have that in front of you, you can still have a reference point as we use that as our framework to go into. So imagine your mind is a 4-passenger car. You have a driver in the front seat, a co-pilot sitting next to the driver, and in the back seat, you got some kids, almost like a family moving. This represents the cognition of your mind. The driver for an ESFJ is a mental process we've nicknamed harmony, and its technical name is extroverted feeling. And by the way, as I talk about these, I am not going to be comprehensive or detailed or specific about all the aspects of this. It's just a quick reference point so we can move forward into some of the things we want to talk about. So the driver for ESFJ is extroverted feeling. We've nicknamed it harmony. It's tuned to the relationship between people's social dynamics, the thing, social standing, how people are interacting with each other, how people are feeling about those interactions, and often people's needs that arise in the middle of their life, like the things that they need to have happen or be supported in order to go to the next level. And often it's emotional support or something like this. This is very much attuned to it. And there's a lot of things that this function does, but this really drives the ESFJ. This makes so much sense to the ESFJ as the driver of their personality. The co-pilot for an ESFJ is a mental process that we've nicknamed memory. Its technical name is introverted sensing. And this is another pretty strong aspect of your personality. And this is how you perceive your world. It's about precedent and understanding what is going on now based on all the small changes and experiences, both personal to an individual, but also collective through a society or through culture or institutions. And it pays attention to the micro changes or the modifications and the deviations that happen on small levels to watch how things shape and move and came to be. So it's focused on things like etymology, history, things that you remember from the past. Is what we nickname it memory. It's your learning by looking through memories to understand how I'm here at this moment. And that, again, for ESFJs rounds out the personality and it does a bunch of other stuff we'll get into, but just those are two functions that the ESFJ moves through the world with superpowers. That's the good news. But just like anything, you're not just that part of yourself. You also have some challenging news as an ESFJ. Sitting directly behind that co-pilot is a cognitive function we put at about 10 years old. We've nicknamed it exploration. Its technical name is extroverted intuition. This, unlike memory that's looking into the past and watching all the changes over time and spending the time with that, this is real time, in the moment, imaginative pattern recognition. Taking things that are seemingly disconnected and putting them together and say, what new thing is created from this? What if I could take this and put it together? What would come from that? What if we didn't have to start from this point? We started from over there and then we jumped over here. What would come from that? It's asking a lot of speculative what if questions in the outer world in real time to make patterns in the mind to speculate the space between the dots that's trying to connect. And it moves very fast. And this is a very important part of an ESFJ. But it's got the kind of the energy level of a 10-year-old. There's a little bit of proving energy. We'll talk about why this is, but there's a little bit of a proving energy or a looking for approval in the outside world from this part of yourself as an ESFJ. And sometimes it can be deeply painful if that approval is not there. And we'll talk about, again, why that shows up. And again, this does so much more than I just said, but that's the broad brush. Let's talk about that 3-year-old that sits behind the driver in the car model of personality. This is, for an ESFJ, a mental process that is technically named introverted thinking. We've nicknamed it as accuracy. This is about getting very specific and precise about your thought process and the internal logic and criteria you do to make decisions around, well, anything, using data and information and logic to do it. It's focused on, depersonalizing things. If the harmony process, the driver for an ESFJ is all about the personal interconnections between people, this process doesn't want that. That clutters the data. That messes up the ability to think cleanly and see information in its most pure form. So in a way, it depersonalizes things and just sits with the ones and the zeros, the numbers, the math of it all, metaphorically speaking, in order to come to conclusions about what's going on or what makes sense. And it, as a 3-year-old, is going to be deeply uncertain. This part of you, while you may even, as an ESFJ, be extremely intelligent. I mean, it's not about intelligence, and often that's how it's talked about. You even may have tons of capacity in this area. You may have skill built here, but it will never be certain. No matter how much skill or capacity you've built, you're always going to question it. And that's really what it means for it to be a 3-year-old. Not that it's going to be unsophisticated. Now, because you're going to not have as much certainty, you may not exercise this as much, and you probably won't develop as much capacity here as maybe the other functions. But I think it has a lot of power for you. There's a lot of aspirations for ESFJs here. And I think it's we know, not just think, we know it's a very important part of your cognition.
Yep. Yeah. So as we go through all 4 of those functions, we're going to talk about them in terms of appropriate expectations to set. Because if you're setting the right expectations for each of these functions, you're going to be clearing those channels, right? You're going to be removing things like disappointment in self or demoralization. And that cleans everything up so that you can receive all that juicy love you've been given to yourself. So thank you for mentioning the concept of certainty as well. Every single function in the order that you just mentioned them is in a descending order of certainty, meaning that the driver is the most certain of all of those functions. And that just means you're not questioning it. When you get an insight or a thought or an inkling or an instinct or whatever it is from that first function, your driver function, you just believe it almost the first time through. And that's what we all do with that function. It's just we have a high degree. Sometimes you could call it overconfidence.
Yeah.
The second function, the co-pilot, has a little less sense of certainty, but it's still quite certain. By the time you get to the 10-year-old, you're now in uncertain territory. And by the time you get to the 3-year-old function, you're now deeply uncertain. So we want to set appropriate expectations based on that, because part of what throttles our ability to do things is when we are experiencing the feeling of uncertainty. Humans hate this feeling, by the way. I've noticed that uncertainty is like everybody's kryptonite. The assumption is if I'm feeling uncertain, it means that there's a red flag. It means that there's something wrong. But sometimes we just feel uncertain because we feel uncertain, right? And it doesn't actually mean anything. So in the functions that we have a high degree of certainty in, and we have a lot more enjoyment and a lot more natural talent, we want to leverage that lack of uncertainty. We want to leverage our certainty to do better in those parts. And then by the time we get to those elements of ourselves where we're deeply uncertain, we have to account for that. We have to account for that in the expectations we're setting, because it's hard to get really good at something that you're just always questioning whether or not you're good at it. So it adds more, it throttles our progress. It adds more energy. We have to apply more energy to do the same thing. So just keep that in mind as we talk about each function and what our expectations should be in them. So let's start with the driver function, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, so you already kind of described extroverted feeling or harmony. Another way of saying this function, or kind of the analogy I always think of, is as the mortar between the bricks. It's the social glue that keeps us all together. It is focused on rapport, right? The energy that is churning between two people that is generative, right? The more we like somebody's energy, and the more they like our energy, the more we are going to create like its own generative energy field. And that's why there are some people that if you're in strong rapport with them, you could hang out with them forever. So there's like an energy that gets produced through that rapport. And so if this function is focused on those energetic rapport moments and the glue that keeps us together as people, then it's going to be tracking things like morale, right? How good do people feel in groups? Who do we need to put together so that everybody's feeling a little better? What needs are going unmet to ensure that morale isn't being compromised by somebody having an unmet need that could be something as simple as a meal. It's the sense of sort of shepherding people, and that is your responsibility, is to sort of shepherd people and make sure that they're okay. So this is a function because it's your driver, because you have a high degree of certainty, you're naturally talented, you're pre-wired to see all of these things and look at them. You want to have very high expectations for yourself here. Now, one could think that high expectations means having a lot of friends or having a lot of people in your life. But high expectations isn't about the quantity of relationships you have. It's about the quality of the relationships you have. And so doing things that foster high quality relationships is something that is not, even if you're a people person, even if you're like naturally gifted talking to others, high quality relationships are difficult.
Yeah.
Right? They require a lot out of us. They require us to be good at conflict resolution, not conflict avoidance. To have a high quality relationship, you have to be good at calling things out.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to get into tiffs and fights sometimes in order to really smooth out, iron out the differences, iron out the problems, and get to a place of resolution. And that creates a lot more intimacy. So a high expectation means you're going to be good at resolving conflict. And that doesn't mean just trusting your ability to do it in the moment. It means having some strategies, maybe having some skill development, having certain ways that you approach conflict. So it means building skill in the quiet times, in the moments when no conflict is happening, so that you're prepared in a moment of conflict to use some of these methodologies.
I think ESFJs probably are at the lead of some of these concepts I'm about to talk about. So I'm actually tuning into some ESFJs I know, and maybe ENFJs, but people that have this harmony process. I think social media is a great lens to look at this through, because you said it's about quality, not quantity. And I think a lot of extroverted feeling people are realizing that, oh, I've got like 500 friends on Facebook, quote unquote, friends on Facebook. But who do I really know and connect with? This is it feels very cold and distant. And I feel like all it does is create this conflict you're talking about, Antonia. And I've seen a lot of harmony people shift and go, you know what? I need to get back to real life stuff. I need to deal with conflict and resolution and all that in the real world. I don't know if it's going to happen online. And maybe all this 500 friend thing, yeah, I want to be connected to my extended family and friends and the people I know. But maybe I do want to curate a smaller, more intimate group for myself. And I've seen a lot of changes and shifts. And I think that's a higher order of thinking for harmony. And that would be something where you're holding it to higher expectation, is you're being judicious about the types of relationships you're creating. You almost have categories for them maybe, or You understand, okay, this person's more in the inner circle and not everybody gets in. Like you just don't, technology makes it so that your harmony now could be attuned to the connections of the world. Like before, technology limited that. You had people in your small town, you had maybe some phone calls and letters you could write, but the advent of the internet and then social media right afterward put us into this thing where, well, if I have the capacity to be friends with everybody, wouldn't I want to be? Well, I mean, there's a limit to that, right? And I think harmony's, it's almost like, it was like sugary at first. Like it was, wow, I could be connected to everyone. It's like, well, that may not be the greatest thing for me to be connected to everybody. First of all, it puts a lot of burden on you as the person.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're going around and all these connections mean obligations to answer messages or to respond or to help somebody, you're going to wear out. And I think a lot of harmony users have found themselves, they need to pull back. I'm worn out by all the needs around me because I'm connected just to too many people. So it's also the quality of the person that you're connected to, like the quality of the connection itself, but also the quality of how many connections, like a qualitative, the quantity in a quality way, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It might be confusing.
Yeah.
But I think that's an example maybe of harmony and how I think it is maturing and the expectations are going up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great example. And you touched multiple times on another expectation that somebody who has extroverted feeling or harmony as a driver should have for themselves, and that is getting extremely good at boundary setting.
Yeah.
So boundaries are one of the most important elements of keeping good relationships going. If you don't have boundaries, and it's not to say that people will always respect them, but if you know what they are and they don't respect them, or usually actually it's not a matter of respect, it's a matter of not knowing them, and they step on a boundary, and then you thoughtfully and patiently let the person know, and you give them an opportunity to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. And now it's fine. Now it's like, hey, so I just wanted to let you know that that's part of my yard, right? Like your dog is, doing his business on. And it's like the person's like, oh, I didn't realize that. I thought it was part of the park or whatever. And it's like, well, it's actually mine. And, so my preference is that your dog doesn't do his business on my yard. Yeah, no problem. It's not a problem at all. I'll pick it up. So it's like that's a conversation between strangers where a person like legitimately didn't know. You let them know, they respected the boundary, and now everything's fine. But when we don't have almost like a reverence for the importance of boundaries, when somebody with extroverted feeling or harmony does not put it in its proper place of being crucial to ensure that we have good, strong interpersonal dynamics, and they maybe allow people to step over their boundaries without saying them, or they don't sit down to figure out what their first of all, you have to figure out what your boundaries actually are. Crucial work, crucial. And if you haven't done that yet, that might be the first protocol. The second is to figure out ways to communicate them thoughtfully and patiently.
Yeah.
The third is to respect your own boundaries and don't allow people to disrespect them, not step on them sometimes out of ignorance, but to exploit or take advantage. And then the next is that you have to respect other people's boundaries.
Yeah.
Right. You just show a general respect for this. And that's hard. It's like the maintenance of that is difficult. And yet, if there's anybody who is suited to doing that work and doing it beautifully, it's somebody who is driving or leading with extroverted feeling or harmony.
I could see a harmony person, ESFJ maybe, saying, Antonia, come on. I'm the person walking the dog, usually. I'm watching to make sure I'm not letting it happen on somebody else's yard. I am tuned in to other people's boundaries. I mean, are you saying I shouldn't expect them to be tuned into mine like I'm tuned into theirs? Because I'm paying attention. And I think in there lies some of the challenge in that the expectation is that everyone's seeing it maybe the way you're seeing it. And I would posit that most boundaries are going to be set individually, but the instinct for harmony is to set them collectively. Like the instinct is, well, why do I have to tell that person that's letting their dog do that on my yard? That should be known collectively in society. And I shouldn't have to assert that specifically because society should have already asserted to that person that's not okay. Mm-hmm. And I think an ESFJ might struggle with that. Like, but I don't know if society has done a good job at setting that for everyone. I don't know if everyone got the memo maybe. And so I think it is up to harmony to say, no, this is my specific boundary because I can't control the world and how it's messaging everything to everybody. So I think the mature harmony here is to be able to communicate what your personal boundaries are not just what you assume society has indicated to others.
Well, and that's another aspect of having high expectations is that you have to start to understand the psychology of human behavior.
Yeah.
And that might feel like it falls in the realm of a different cognitive function. But I think when extroverted feeling or harmony really has a high expectation for itself, it's going into the deeper parts. It's like, it's not making those assumptions. It's not saying I shouldn't have to. Like most of us, when it comes to our strengths, we are very much overburdened with them. Like, as in, people rely on us to do that work for them. And on some level, that's understandable, right? On some level, if we're the person who shows up with abundance and somebody else shows up with scarcity, they might not even be thinking about how much they're asking for us to share our gifts with them. Because usually it all works out in the wash, right? It's like in reverse, it's like when I've heard people talk about emotional labor, I started thinking about, thought labor. And I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people who use me for thought labor, but I also use other people for emotional labor. So I guess it washes out, right? And so there is a part of us that can kind of feel overburdened. And that's when actually I'd go back to, we aren't setting good boundaries.
Yeah.
Right. So anytime you feel like you're doing too heavy of a lift, it needs to be communicated and it's usually the people in your life. It's not to strangers. It's not to, that's like, they might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, but most of the time, if we're feeling like we're overgiving, it's the people who are closest to us that those are the relationships we should be looking at.
I think the measurements for this, just in case you want tangible measurements, is frustration, agitation, resentment, and anger. If you're feeling those emotions, especially toward other people or circumstances, my guess is 9 times out of 10, it's a boundary issue. 9 times out of 10, those emotions are telling you that something's messed up with somebody's boundaries in the dynamic. Mm-hmm. And pay attention. So if you're feeling like agitated, angry, frustrated, resentful toward your partner, my suspicion is go on a hunt for, is there a boundary crossing on their side or my side, as an example, right? And by the way, I'm talking to ESFJs as if they don't know this stuff, right? I mean, take it for what it is, ESFJ. I feel like I'm saying something that most ESFJs know, but just in case somebody's listening that needs a metric for, okay, how do I know that I've got a boundary cross, or how do I know I need to increase capacity here, or I need to stretch this harmony process? I think those are some measuring ways to measure the dynamics happening on the ground.
Well, and keeping your finger on the pulse of the emotions, not just other people, but your own.
Yeah.
Like anger is actually a really helpful emotion for extroverted feeling. Like you said, it lets me know that a boundary is crossed. Now, does that mean that I have to blow up, right? If I'm angry, now does that mean that I have to like make it everybody else's problem? Or do I just go, oh, I'm angry, I should probably do something about that. That's probably a thing. I should maybe go a little deeper. And that's setting higher expectations. It's having the expectation that you will master interpersonal relationships because you've got all of the natural talent in there. So it means putting some forethought into, like what is this group going to need in order to stay close together? When we've had groups of people staying with us, I almost always implement a thing that I think of as tribe time, which is let's all get together and like watch something funny together. And it's like, wow, like if we're maybe all gathered to do a work project, that feels like a waste of time. And I'm like,
yes,
nope.
It does.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Like, no, because we're going to need the good feeling we got from tribe time to carry into the work project so that we're not like frustrated with each other if like it's going slower than we want to, or why did you make that decision?
Brings the morale up for everyone.
You got it. It's just a general sense of goodwill. And so it's like, it's thinking about those kinds of things all the time, and in communities, in your family, like in all of the elements you touch. And it's easy to self-assess as a relationship, like a master of relationships, when we do have the quantity. But really, again, it's the quality. It's the quality you're looking at. It's the ability to really understand what do people truly, truly need to stay glued together, not in a codependent way. That's the key. The key is that we can glue each other with some pretty strong adhesive in a codependent way. But we're talking about mastering interdependent relationships where nobody needs the other person. Like we're together because we need each other because no man is an island, but we don't need each other to say cover our faults for each other or to turn a blind eye to our bad behaviors. What happens if we're both healthy people and we're in a relationship? It's mastering those kinds of relationships.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about with the driver before we move on?
I think just understanding that this extends out to both personal and professional.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a mastery of both of those elements. and recognizing that this is a function that's a little more difficult because it intrinsically includes other humans. The other functions don't. A little bit of extroverted thinking does, because if you want to get something big done, you've got to have other people as part of that project, right? So extroverted thinking or effectiveness leans over into this. But this is the only function that really truly relies on not just yourself, but other people.
Yeah.
And so that does make it harder in some ways. It really, truly does. And so it's not always easy to do. And it's not always our fault. Sometimes if we don't have high quality relationships in our life, it's not because we're bringing the bad element. We just haven't concluded or completed it. And that's on us.
Yeah.
Right. And I say this as a person who also uses extroverted feeling or harmony. I just have it lower down in my car, in my car model. But it does make it different than other functions. And recognizing that, there are challenges that are in there that mean that you're going to have to be good at assessing and not maybe taking everything on yourself as much. Recognizing that this is a two-way street.
Yeah. So that's the driver of harmony, extroverted feeling. Let's talk about the ESFJ's co-pilot. Again, if you're looking at that car model personality, it's called memory. Its technical name is introverted sensing. And this is the other strong part of you. Now, there is a temptation, because it's a little bit, for an ESFJ, this is going to feel a little slower and more methodical and a little bit more detail-oriented. And if you're an ESFJ, especially if you're a very outgoing, fast-paced, very connective, get a lot of stuff done and movement and a lot of energy type ESFJ, this might feel a little bit like, I don't really want to be present to this. This feels like it's slowing me down and breaking my connections, and I want to get connected and move faster. And so there might be a little bit more discipline to focus here. And there's a lot here for ESFJs. It's very powerful.
Well, this is the function that helps ESFJs develop patience.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about experiencing things, it's about processing your experiences, reviewing, reevaluating, thinking through things that you've already, like how things were done, and processing or thinking about other people's experiences. So it's a much slower pace of function than the more responsive energy of the driver of extroverted feeling or harmony.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as we think about this, then this is tons of room for growth. This is also the part of you, for everybody, their co-pilot, that position. But for you, this memory process for you as an ESFJ, this is the translator inside of your own mind. This is how you're going to translate both itself, the co-pilot, and the driver of your personality. And you're going to help have those parts talk to the parts in your backseat, the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old. So this is the part of you that all the good information and translation will run through, this part of your mind in a way. So developing this helps inner dialogue and communication, and we're going to talk about that little inner mean voice that you might have running in the background telling you you're not good enough. This translator can help with that. This memory process can help with that. And there's a ton of capacity for growth. So as we talk about expectations, Antonia, we're going to talk about setting pretty high expectations for this too, although there's room to step into those, where the harmony process you're using all the time. Mm-hmm. This one might need more intention and attention to grow it.
Right. And so just as you mentioned, we want to have high expectations for this function as well. Very high expectations. But it's got a little bit of a different energy. Like you said, you just called it a translator for the other functions. Part of the reason why it's good at keeping things in line and translating is because it carries with it. And we're going to just reference briefly a model called the 8-function model that was developed by our coach, Dr. John Beebe. He applies an archetypal energy to each of these positions. And he says this auxiliary or co-pilot position, he calls it the function that has parental energy. So there's a desire to contribute with this function. It's like parenting the world with it. You want to contribute, you want to help people out, and you're willing to do it a little thanklessly, because parents do a lot of work in behalf of their children thanklessly, right? They may never get a thank you from their kids. And if they do, it's going to be a long time from now. So there has to be an intrinsic reward for doing so much work in behalf of others, like in parenting. And that energy applies to this function, the position. In the case of introverted sensing or memory, there is an intrinsic reward that somebody with ESFJ preferences gets when they're able to help other people out using it. And in fact, sometimes they'll be more faithful recorders of other people's experiences than even their own. They'll remember thoughtful details about other people's preferences more than they'll even know what they want at all. And so there's a natural instinct to do this for others. And so the high expectation comes with it, comes with the energy of contribution. When you are setting an expectation here and you're working on it, part of it is how am I giving with this function? How am I helping other people? And then the other piece of the high expectation is how am I self-parenting with this function? Not just helping others, not just doing for others, but how am I also doing for myself? So part of that high expectation is creating stability. Introverted sensing or memory, one of the things it does better than anything else is it lays tracks of continuity. It's stable, it's reliable. There's a sense of safety that's a part of it. So maintaining a safe, stable, orderly home, making sure that you've got your fingers on the pulse of income so that your family is going to be safe in that way, that it's got, it's generating enough money so that everybody's going to be okay. It's about ensuring that family lore and what you could almost call institutional knowledge about the family is preserved. And so everybody feels like, okay, we've got some continuity, we've got some stability here. Mom or dad or whatever, right? The person who's providing this energy, they're gonna make sure that we're all okay. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to help other people by giving them a sense of continuity and stability.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a heavy lift, but that's the expectation you want to set for yourself.
Yeah, it's a way, I think, to help the self and others tune to cultural, family, and societal cues that we all engage with. And oh, here's how this works. And I understand it because I've experienced it. I've been tracking it and paying attention. I think can get down to keeping track of details, right? The word accounting always has a financial or mathematic component, but accounting of everything, the neighborhood you live in and the changes over time, accounting for the way things have developed and new things have come about and what was once and how things used to be. I think there's a lot of attunement to this that we need people that steward knowledge over a timeline. They take a knowledge or understanding maybe that wasn't even theirs, like you're talking about, that there's the help with it, but there's also a stewardship that's part of this. They understand it and they carry it and steward it until the next generation is ready for it in a general broad sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. There's, the people that started some of the institutions that we have in our lives, in our countries and things that we all come from were started hundreds of years ago. And people have stewarded those institutions and the knowledge of those and all the things that means. And they've kept track, whether it was inside of themselves or literally writing it down. They've recorded things, and that's how we know where we came from. That's how we know how things have been. I think it's a very important, especially with technology and all the fast-paced changes. It may be needed now more than ever, a ballast of continuity like you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important. And I think ESFJs are extremely equipped, especially for things like culture and social dynamics, human interactions. I mean, you can do all sorts of stuff, but those, I think a lot of ESFJs get lit up about those ideas. Like, oh yeah, I like that kind of stuff, so I'm going to pay attention to that kind of stuff. Well, great. That's going to help you grow this for yourself and increase capacity. And again, the whole framework of this is self-love. You're attuned to those things. You feel good about yourself. You've opened up the channels and it's like, man, I love myself because I'm keeping track of my family's lore, or I'm keeping track of this. I'm tuned into what came before, and I can help calm people down. I go, what do we know, everybody? Like, everybody's upset about all these new changes, but what do we know? What can we rely upon? Let's tune back to that. Thank you for making us feel stable and centered. And you can do that for yourself as well, for self-love reasons.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people bucket this idea of tradition and, I hate the holidays, or I hate this thing or this thing. And it's like, but it's something we can predict. It's something we can rely on. And so not that every ESFJ is going to be holiday mad or anything. It's not like they're all going to be super into it. But even if it's not holidays per se, it's this idea of traditions. And that might just be referential to your family or to the people who your found family. It's things that you all have created tradition around. You all have created stability around. And so in really chaotic times, in times where it's hard to predict what's coming next, I would say contemporary times are very chaos oriented. Lots of disruption, lots of uncertainty, lots of I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future. I guess we just have to, keep hanging on the news. And in a time period like that where everything around us feels like it's thrown into chaos, it's people who have this function, and I would even argue maybe particularly the people who have it as a parent function.
Yeah.
That are some of the best at going like, okay, but let's ground ourselves. Let's not get caught up in the madness too much. If that person has developed this function,
Yeah.
if they have had high expectations for what they provide, a sense of responsibility to others to make sure that they are part of this ballast.
Yeah, I think this process is very tuned into the symbols and traditions that represent past experience. So like a holiday, for example, there's a lot of symbols we use. Let's say the holiday of Christmas and the one that I celebrate. There's a lot of symbology, like a tree and all these different accoutrements that speak to a shared humanity that we've all experienced from time to time, from over time, I should say. And so that's the kind of thing they're tuned into, and they're symbolic and they represent something, and that stewardship's important. And I think that, again, that could be increased. What are some other ways maybe to measure this? Like how, or maybe ways that there's an obstruction to self-love here would be probably important for an ESFJ to hear as well.
Well, ignoring it, right? Not seeing it as that important, maybe being bored by the function. If somebody who has ESFJ preferences doesn't really give themselves time to do sufficient processing of their experiences, then it's not what it's doing. It's what it's not doing. It's how it's not showing up for them. And so making sure that somebody with these preferences is not the chaos agent themselves, right? That they do have a sense of grounding, that they're not just up and going, go, 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 go. And I think, as mentioned before, it's the function that gives people of this type patience, but it also gives them resilience.
Yeah.
It gives them the ability to watch themselves overcome obstacles. And then this is the function that takes an accounting of that. It's the function that goes, yeah, no, I mean, I guess I did go through that whole experience.
Yeah.
And that you've fully processed a memory or an experience, when on the other side is acceptance. So as a person is processing the material from the past, and sometimes it's not good stuff. Like sometimes, I mean, a lot of us have some pretty disturbing things from our past that still need to be processed. And once it can get to a place of acceptance, part of that acceptance is I lived through it. I overcame. I'm the person, like that's part of the crucible that helps define who I am right now.
Yeah.
And because of that, I know I'm a resilient person. And I know I can get through anything.
Yeah.
And that's part of where that stability comes from.
Yes. And I would say, going back to the social media comments I was making around the harmony driver for ESFJs, I think it's this function. So if an ESFJ, for example, would tell me, Joel, I had all these friendships. I was friending everybody on the planet on Facebook, let's say, or some social media platform I was on in the early days. I would just indiscriminately just say yes to every friendship. But then I really sat and thought with my memory, the part of me that is my memory process. And I went, okay, I feel unhappy and unfulfilled with all these connections. I should be happy and feel that. But what do I know about humanity and my relationship to self and others? What do I know about the experiences I've had? And a person maybe with ESFJ preferences remembers a time before they had all those connections. And they remember having a curated small group of friends and maybe a larger cultural group like a church or social connection or something, and a family. And they went, man, I was happier back then. That's what I know. And processing the experience going, that's different than the experience I'm having now. I'm unhappy in this experience here. I've got too much going on. I feel like I've got to always continue to think of something new and keep it all updated. And I'm losing track of people and their needs. Well, maybe I should tune back into what I remember from before and bring some of that wisdom forward. Maybe this decision, which many ESFJs report, is not to just completely disconnect from social media, but to have a better relationship with it because you have a longer through line you're looking back to. You have a history. You have pre-social media history you might be looking at with this part of yourself to go, yeah, there was a slower, more curated experience with social things. I need to bring that forward now and maybe apply some of those principles of my memories to what's going on for me now and make some changes to adjust. That's the wisdom this can bring to an ESFJ, as an example. Now, I'm not saying everybody's got that same experience. I'm just saying I think that's the way this can like actually show up to help you curate your life as you go forward, which then now opens up channels to go, I love myself because I'm not putting myself in the position of all these one-sided relationships where people are taking from me and I just have to go serve, serve, serve. I actually have thought about the type of people I want to surround myself, the people that matter based on my history. I feel good. I feel a sense of self-love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's how it turns into self-parenting.
Yes.
Because you tapped into an element, which was, it's not just like, what do I know from my past? It's like, what do we know about humans from the humans past?
Right.
Right. Like how do we incorporate that practical wisdom that has come down through the ages, incorporated into my life? And so in that way, an ESFJ in this case is self-parenting with practical wisdom, right? And then when one goes through all of their experiences, like I said, you know that you have fully processed an experience because the result is acceptance. That is not easy to do, right? It's not always easy to do because there's a lot of experiences we have that might be very hard to accept.
Acceptance doesn't mean condone that experience. It doesn't mean accept the behavior or like, oh, that was okay for that person to do to me. It's accepting that it happened at all. Just that's a fact.
Yes.
It's accepting the fact that it was.
Right. And
doesn't mean you approve of it. I just want to make it very
exactly.
clear that that's not what we're talking about.
And that's a really good distinction. It's an important distinction.
Yeah.
The difference between accepting and condoning, or, what's another word? What is the word that you were used
Approval
earlier?
or disapproval.
You and I used a word earlier that I was like, that was the word I've been looking for. Not sanctioning.
Condone, but I don't know.
No, it was before the podcast.
Oh.
It was like earlier in the day.
It was like many years ago, Joel. No. You said this random word in conversation. Why do you not remember that exact moment that
I've been using a lot lately?
Okay.
It sounds like sanctioning, but it's not.
Oh, ratify.
Thank you. Oh,
ratify.
Okay. Thank you very much. That would have just driven me crazy.
Which feels very like political. And,
it does.
And historic. I don't know.
And yet that was the word my brain was looking for.
Ratify.
Anyway. So yes, acceptance doesn't mean approving. It doesn't mean ratifying. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means like, yeah, that's what happened, and I can't pretend it didn't.
Yep.
And what ends up happening is when you fully process those experiences, you can call all the lessons from them, all the wisdom from them. And the thing that people with SJ preferences have is a heightened ability to call wisdom from experiences, their own and others, like the human experience. How have people been acting all, throughout the generations and throughout the ages? There is a called wisdom. And so having the patience to sit down and ruminate on those experiences and get the benefit of I guess I did make it through that, didn't I? I have resilience.
Yeah.
All of that is where you get these ESFJs who are so seasoned.
Yeah.
Who are so just delightful to be around.
CULL. Ring, ring. Hello, wisdom. You there?
Yeah.
Not call wisdom, but cold wisdom.
Yes, cold wisdom.
which actually speaks to where I'm going next, which is the 10-year-old for you as an ESFJ. So what I just did there is I heard CULL, but I took the pronunciation and I connected it to a phone call wisdom. And then I kind of made a pun and made a little funny joke there. And that happened in the moment. As Antonia was talking, I made that connection. Now, you could say, well, those are kind of connected because they sound alike. There's a rhyme there. But just imagine that like unleashed into all sorts of connections and patterns writ large. Well, that's what this exploration part of you as an ESFJ is doing all the time. It's looking for things that are disconnected to say, well, what if I put them together? What happens? Or if I rhyme that with this word, what does that make me think of? And then that leads to another thought. And then all of a sudden you've got this cool little new idea or thing or joke or whatever's coming of it. And you get this sense as an ESFJ, I think you have this experience in your life. You're probably very quick. I bet you've got a great sense of humor and you're quick to banter with people and come up with little quips and ideas. And it's a fun, playful part of yourself. And we put it about 10 years old. Wouldn't 10-year-olds be some of the most playful, fun people on the planet? And it's the childlike part of you. But sometimes it takes itself very serious. This part of all of us that are 10-year-old, technically called the tertiary place. But for ESFJs, this part of you might want to show up and get approval from the world, much like a real 10-year-old. Hey, mom and dad, I'm doing good, right? Or hey, world, I'm doing good. Can I get approval and make me feel settled because I'm uncertain that I'm doing a good job in this?
Yeah.
And so because of that proving energy, I think this can show up for an ESFJ. They think it's requiring a higher expectation than maybe is appropriate.
Yeah.
And setting a high expectation for this or feeling an obligation to this at a high level of proficiency or certainty is certainly going to erode the ability for self-love.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, if the co-pilot or auxiliary has the energy of a parent, the position of this function has the energy of what's called an eternal child. And like you mentioned, it's the first time we're experiencing uncertainty. So what does a 10-year-old do when they feel uncertain? They go ask an adult. And so that desire for approval is really what it is it's an attempt to gain certainty. It's an attempt to have our uncertainty calm down. Like, I'm doing okay here, right? I've got this on lock. And like you mentioned, it can look like I'm the fun person, right? And it might be like a high expectation that you're always in a good mood, because extroverted intuition or exploration, it's kind of an effervescent function. It's I like to think of it as carbonated. If extroverted feeling or harmony is the rapport between people, this is the function that is the rapport between ideas. And so it likes to connect things that are, like you said, are disparate. And it's kind of, it's got this possibility thinking and this what if, and what if we connected this thing and this thing? And what if I knew what was going on over there, even though I don't have a lot of information, but I'm kind of guessing and, I was right. And so it's very, it's a kind of a boingy function, right? It's buoyant. And when a person with ESFJ preferences sets a reasonable expectation for it, it means that it can help them with things that they might shy away from. So you do want to still have an expectation of yourself in this function. You don't want to think, well, it's an uncertain function, so I guess I'll never be good at it. Now, you want to have sufficient expectation. You just don't want to put the burdens or the expectations of, say, an adult onto this child. You don't want it to think that it can do more than it can actually accomplish. And then to seek approval from the outside world to overcome that sense of uncertainty, and then feel demoralized if the outside world's like, yeah, you weren't right there, or that's not how that looks. So a part of this is going like, okay, so I understand this is a precocious part of who I am, and I need to keep my finger on the pulse of that. But some elements of having a reasonable expectation is that, you are a curious person and you like to explore. You enjoy novelty. You enjoy creative problem solving. You like, bantering with people, and you like coming up with creative solutions. You like brainstorming. All of these things are well within your wheelhouse. So being a person who will try new foods, being a person who be a little adventurous and get outside your usual modality, having an ability to be a little, spontaneous. Maybe even if something gets in the middle of a routine that you've developed, having a little bit of flexibility around that. Like being kind of more of a chill person, right? Like this function helps you be a little bit more chill if it is balanced. What it can really give somebody of this type is an ability to not sweat the small stuff. Yep. And to get outside of what would usually be considered their comfort zone and be willing to have, what does the commercial say? Like a Disney side, or like a little bit of an adventurous side. Yeah. All of that is totally reasonable. And I want to highlight that idea of creative problem solving. I think it is reasonable to believe that ESFJs can be quite creative in the problem solving. And they can have some pretty strong intuitive understandings and awarenesses. They can kind of go get what's going on. And especially since they're so tuned into people, understanding the sort of the office politics, or understanding what's going on, that person, I think, nobody's supposed to date in our department, but I think those two people, even though they're not really giving many signals, I think I know what's going on over there. I think they might be dating on the down low or whatever. Like those kinds of intuitive understandings, that's well within an ESFJ's wheelhouse.
I knew an ESFJ a few years ago who wanted to learn Spanish. And, there's the capacity of that memory process. Copilot, you get out a book and you study the material and you learn it over time through a timeline. That's how you learn. She decided to just move to Argentina. Mm-hmm. She was American, and she just moved to Argentina for 6 months and took Spanish lessons in a country that spoke the language, and had some other ways to support it and fund it. and all of that. But basically, I think it was her saying, you know what, I'm gonna find a leveraged way, a creative way to learn this faster than methodically going through it. I think there's a lot of value in the Copilot, don't get me wrong, but this gave her a way to solve a puzzle or to speed up the process or to do it a little bit different than most people do it. Mm-hmm. And so she got different results, faster results in this case, in this scenario, and could speak fluently within 6 months. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing this can unlock for you as an ESFJ. It helps you find those like opportunities and advantages or ways of just thinking about it a little differently than the rest of everyone, that you can get good results from it.
Yeah. You have it in you to take risks, personal risks, lifestyle risks. She did. She took a bit of a risk. Now, she wasn't married at the time and she didn't have children. So she was in a context where that wouldn't destabilize others.
Yeah.
And so that's a piece of it.
Young, like college age, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But those are, risks. Like that's a part of the expectation you can have for yourself, is that you can take measured risks and it's going to be okay. You've got that. You have the courage in you. You have a function that can lend you courage to take some of those risks. What's unreasonable and will cause demoralization is the idea that you can handle a life of chaos, that you can, somehow just keep it all together, even though you don't have well-established routines, that you don't have, like a substrate of continuity, that you can just be responsive and reactive and just keep it all together and always, anticipate needs and always anticipate what's going on and not burn out. So this is a function that if you feel like you have to prove your ability to be fun and be spontaneous and constantly be doing the new cool thing and always, always have whatever, be impressive by always having what other people need, by pulling it out of your bag and being like, I've got that random thing you need. Like being that kind of person is too heavy a lift. It creates too much chaos. And so the idea that you can rely on this function like like you would an adult function, right? Like somebody who really can take care of handle everything. That's an unreasonable expectation. It will lead to a lot of resentment.
Yeah. Any others?
Mm-hmm. Another unreasonable expectation is that you can constantly be novelty seeking. This is a function that likes new and novel things. And constant novelty seeking with this function is oftentimes what turns into addictions. Particularly, I'm thinking of things like shopping addictions or maybe even gambling addictions, that like looking for that hit, that dopamine hit of the new and the creative and something you haven't had before. The belief that you can handle that, like you've got it covered, you've got it handled. You might want to make sure that you are not overvaluing its ability to self-regulate. Like it's a function that will get you excited. It's not a function that's going to throttle some of your worst impulses. So ensuring that you have that you're not expecting it to self-regulate, right? That you have other things that are regulating your behavior. And then the expectation that you're always going to have the best creative solution, or that you're going to have the right intuition every time, or that you're always going to be able to like sell your idea to somebody and be persuasive. It's not 100% for anybody. So to feel like you have maybe failed if you didn't have a good creative solution, or that this is also a function that kind of taps into societies and what's going on within society in a more systematic way. And I think it's a reasonable expectation to study systems and to study like the networks of how people engage and interact. You might find that really interesting. If you're into type, that's basically what's happening and what you're doing. But sometimes you're not going to see the systems clearly, and so just giving yourself like permission to be wrong sometimes, or to need more information, or to be more careful thinking it through as opposed to just immediately getting something.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the 10-year-old, which again, proper expectations here. I think the other thing to mention is this is the opposite of the Copilot of memory, introverted sensing. So extroverted intuition or exploration, when it's activated, memory's kind of diminished or turned off in a way. You could almost see it as a coin where you're seeing one side showing and the other one's facing down. And so if you're activating your Copilot of memories in ESFJ, your exploration is diminished or shut down. So when we think about that, we're like, well, how do I move through life if two parts of me seemingly are at odds? Like if one's turned on and I'm activating that through my personality, well, how do I deal with that? Well, almost imagine what happens if you take that coin and you pick it up and you put it on its side and you fling it, you flick it and it spins. And when it spins so fast, it's hard to see which side's facing you. They're oscillating so quickly. And I think what we would suggest, and we have suggested to many clients and people we've coached, is a balance between these two energies creates almost like that spinning coin effect, where you're able to go between them with finesse, or quite frankly, with a lot of grace and usability for your cognition, that you're showing up having both of these parts represented. You're not just overvaluing one or the other, and they're in their proper placement and balance. And I think that also puts an ESFJ on footing to go, I love myself because I've got all of these things balanced and operating. I don't feel like one thing in my sense of personality is hijacking my life. And I actually like myself and love myself because I think I'm doing well in all of this.
Yeah. Carl Jung called that a transcendent function. When we are able to take polarity opposites, like the sensing and the intuitive, they're the opposite. And one's introverted sensing and the other one's extroverted intuition. So those are opposites in every way. And when a person can figure out how to get them to work in tandem with each other, to work together, he called that transcendence. So how does one do that? Well, if introverted sensing or memory has a parental energy, and extroverted intuition or exploration has an eternal child energy, when that part of you is seeking approval, right? It's seeking this a relief from the sense of uncertainty. The best way to do that is to ask the parent function, are we okay, right? It's like, don't seek approval from the outside world, seek approval from the parental energy. And so extroverted intuition or exploration is, it's a disruptive function, but that's okay. You can allow for disruptions at times, right? It's seeking novelty, it's seeking new, it's doing the opposite of looking for consistency and routine, and it's trying to disrupt something to just see what happens. And you're allowed to have some of that, but only if you're not disrupting this, again, I'll use the word, the substrate of your life, like the routines you've laid. And I don't mean like every once in a while, I mean like in an inability to establish a routine. If you've got so much of that child energy sort of taking over, you won't be able to lay the tracks of a routine at all. And so you want to make sure that your parental function, particularly in self-parenting, is already established. You've got your routines, you've got your continuity, you've got your sense of responsibility, you've got those careful details managed, and you've got that sense that people can rely on you. And now you're adding the fun, the effervescent, the creative thinking, the novelty. Now you're adding that on top of it. And that's okay. That's a perfect balance between those two things. You just don't want to give too much power to the eternal child energy. And you don't want to be avoiding that parental energy of memory or introverted sensing.
So let's talk about that 3-year-old inferior cognitive function. Introverted thinking is the technical name. Its nickname is accuracy. And I think that ESFJs will probably experience this both in their desire to be precise and accurate around information. Things like how you write and punctuation and grammar, that's where it could be applied. But also sometimes ESFJs report that they have this inner mean critic that can talk about other people and maybe be critical, but man, is it about the self. It's just this inner of what, you're not good enough, you didn't do that good enough, you're stupid, you're not worthy of that. Just like this voice that's running in the head constantly, this inner dialogue telling them that they don't deserve whatever, they're not good enough. And man, that could really, talk about not being able to show yourself love. If that voice is running all the time, I wouldn't feel very good about myself to love myself.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of ESFJs listening.
Yeah. So just like introverted sensing or memory and extroverted intuition or exploration are two sides of the same coin, so is extroverted feeling and harmony the driver, and this 3-year-old of introverted thinking or accuracy. They're also polarity opposites. But unlike that co-pilot and 10-year-old, that parent and child energy that Dr. John Beebe calls that the axis of relating to others. So that co-pilot and 10-year-old is more about contribution. It's more about our relationship to the outside world. The driver and the 3-year-old, or what's called the dominant and inferior, that's the axis of relating to self. So that's our relationship with ourself. That's me for me. And we are still in uncertain territory, but unlike the 10-year-old or the eternal child, that when they feel uncertain, because that's part of our relationship to other people, we can just look around and go, Did I do that well? Am I doing okay? And if other people give us approval, we kind of calm down, right? We go, okay, I feel a little more certain now. But because this part of ourselves is our relationship to ourselves and it's uncertain, we can't get other people to tell us that we're good at this and have it calm us down. In fact, sometimes we'll try that methodology and it just won't work. And we'll try it again and it just won't work. One way that this looks for people with ESFJ preferences is you might actually be very credentialed. Introverted thinking or accuracy is about it's about information and data. Well, really what it is it's about logical consistency. It's about things making sense and outside of social truths or social impact. Extroverted feeling or harmony, that's all about rapport with other people. It's all about our relationships and truth, things that make sense to us as individuals outside of our relationships. Those are just naturally divisive. What was that one quote that you recently said, that the cost of telling the truth or the cost of being honest is that you're going to risk offense?
Yeah, it came from Eben Pagan, one of our mentors, said that. Yeah, the cost of truth is the risk of offense.
Right.
I think is how it goes. Something around that line.
Yeah, because no two people, if you really drill down and figure out like what makes sense to you as an individual,
yeah,
no two people have the same wiring. They don't have the same experiences. They don't. There are too many variations in what it means to be a person to always come to the same conclusion as each other. So this is a function that feels like it's risking divisiveness. It's risking that if I communicate what actually makes sense to me, what I'm actually thinking, especially if it's in contrast to the rest of the group, that I'm going to be dogpiled. Like people won't get it. And because it's an uncertain function, there's not that certainty of fighting for your own viewpoint, fighting for your own opinion. Now, you might have shored up, like sometimes you can do it. Sometimes you can sort of shore up some confidence and some grit and go, no, this is what I think. But it almost always gets flooded or immediately is followed with a chaser of, should I have said that? Was I right about that? How do I know? And so in the inner dialogue, even if the outer appearance, even if the persona appears to be quite confident in one's opinion, the inner dialogue is not matching that. It's uncertainty. It's questioning. It's like, oh, did I just sound dumb there? Was I supposed to share my opinion? Is it okay if it's different than the rest of the group? So I think that's one of the reasons why it manifests the way you're describing.
Absolutely. And we're talking about its like most extreme form, critical. It's trying to be calibrative. It's trying to, in its best intention, it's trying to help us calibrate and be better and with better thoughts. But if it's way down there and there's uncertainty, you might just hear criticism, not calibration. Right? That's what you're hearing. And I just want to say on the surface level, though, if you zoom way out of more of the more challenging material there, thoughts are not fun. I mean, I'm sorry, I know you're a thinker, Antonia, but the moment you bring thinking and logic into an environment or to experience,
it kills the vibe, man.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine the scene of the movie scene where people in a club like woohoo, and the music's pumping and blaring, and everyone's having a good time, and that scene in the movie where it's like those 80s movie tropes where they're like holding the drink or everybody's having fun, and like the nerdy guy comes up to talk to the girl during the big vibe time, and he's trying to introduce some kind of like, I have a computer, and he's like logically talking.
Well, actually.
Yeah, like with all this, and it's like, ooh, and like the girls kind of like, high school girls turn away from her, college girls turn away, and they go on, it's like, oh, this guy's killing the vibe. Mm-hmm. It's also that, but take that inside of yourself, right? That's the movie scene of it. But imagine you're connecting with people and meeting needs, and you're exploring even with your 10-year-old process, and you're tuned to all this, and you're in a carbonated fun, and you all of a sudden have to go into thinking deeply about this concept and a logical consistency. Well, you can't be in that fun space when you go there. So I don't want to kill what's happening. So it's not just that it has the critic. It's not a natural place you're just going to want to go because it's going to feel like it's taking you away from the experience that's much more like it feels better to have. But this is a very important part of yourself.
Well, by the same token, there's also a lot that comes along with extroverted feeling or harmony that isn't just fun, rapport, and vibe.
Exactly.
There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work involved.
Getting people's needs met, attuning to the social or relational dynamics.
Yeah.
That person that you're hanging out with a group of friends. Now, you get together every week. Now, the third week, that same person is starting to talk about their problems again and their needs. And you
Mhm.
guys, you know that all of you and your friends have given them attention. And now it's like this part of you, this little 3-year-old part, this accuracy goes, you know what? This is actually not okay anymore.
Mhm.
Like my logic, my internal truth says that they need to, it makes sense to me, as well as the vibe for everybody, that we actually don't talk about their needs this week.
Mhm.
And this is the part of you, I think, as an ESFJ that now can have the clarity to establish the boundaries and the parameters to support the thing that you do so well with your driver.
Yeah.
Because doing all that hard work with harmony without something to calibrate it and support it to say, no, that's not okay. Okay, that's okay. And have judicious attunement of your function as a support structure, you're kind of a sitting duck and you'll get taken advantage of, or just get over, like you'll burn out, or you'll feel resentful, or whatever, fill in the emotion you might have. So this is so important to calibrate that harmony too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just on its own merits, uh, the function is there to remind everybody, but especially people who have it in their car model, you have a right to your own opinion.
Oh yeah.
You're allowed to believe whatever makes sense to you. And one of the challenges,
Even if the group disagrees.
well, that's one of the challenges of extroverted feeling or harmony, is that because it doesn't like to offend that sense of rapport, sometimes it will kind of brush things under a rug, or allow people to believe that the person using that function thinks something different than they think. Like, you think like us, don't you? And that function will have a tendency to go along to get along.
Harmony.
Harmony, exactly. Introverted thinking or accuracy does not. In fact, it takes a hit every time it doesn't represent its own truth, right? Every time it, like, other people misrepresent what it thinks, it's not happy about that. And while people with ESFJ preferences should be prioritizing relational information over, things that are logically congruent and consistent, there's a reason it falls in that stack. At the end of the day, this function reminds you that you have a right to disagree. You have a right to have your own opinion. You don't always have to share it if you don't want to, but sometimes you do need to. Sometimes it's crucial and critical to share your opinion. And particularly when it comes to being honest, this is a function that keeps us honest, right? It keeps us, one could call, radically honest. And there's a lot of white lies we tell in society for social lubrication. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like if the person doesn't look good in a dress and they ask you if you look good, if they look good and you say, yes, you always look beautiful or whatever. It's not like, oh, you're just chipping away at your soul with all those lies. I mean, there's a value to having, a little bit of like peace amongst people.
I'd call it a social truth.
Yeah, right. Social truth.
It's true socially.
Right.
It may not be accurate or truthful, like 1-0 truth, but it's a social truth.
And there are times when a person asks you if they look good in that dress, and it's a really important night for them. You know that whether or not they look good in that dress really means something to that individual. It's not a casual question. And you think that actually they don't look that great in it. And you know that this would be like a true lie to your friend. It would be doing them a disservice. In that moment, it's not just a quick little yeah, you're fine. You look great. Let's go. It's something that has more weight to it. So the expectation of this function is, first, that it's deeply uncertain and it will never be something that you use as a primary decision-making process. You're never going to lean on it as heavily as you lean on your feeling function, because it's just never going to it's never going to feel that same sense of confidence. But you do need to set some expectations. And the expectation you can set is that you can be honest. You can be honest with yourself and you can be honest with other people when it matters, when there's weight to it, when you know that there are implications. The second is that you can be logically consistent with your own opinions, meaning that you are smart and you can think things through and come to intelligent conclusions. That you're not somebody that just goes, oh, I don't like to think about that. People with ESFJ preferences, particularly when they really start to explore this part of themselves, have a surprising amount of computing capacity. It's not as fun, like you said, as maybe, sort of socially interacting, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to study, to understand, to come to logical and reasonable conclusions, to get what's going on, to be able to be what's called disassociated from themselves for a minute to really look at something dispassionately and understand what the core principles of it are, right? Like what's the core of this, and what doesn't change no matter who's involved,
Yeah.
right? What are those core principles? And so you should have an expectation that you are a reasonable, logical person that is honest with yourself, honest with other people, particularly when there's weight to it, and that you're a person that can figure things out.
Yeah. I also want to inject something here specific to ESFJ men that I want to give some comments to. As an ESFJ man, and depending on your context, everybody's different and comes from different backgrounds. So I'm going to speak to the ESFJ man that this applies to. There are some circles that you grew up in that have socially conditioned you to feel like in order to be the man or masculine with masculine qualities, you have to turn down the part of you that is your driver, that's your harmony process, that's a little bit more attuned to the nurturing elements of life. I think that process can be deeply masculine and express itself that way.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes ESFJ men get the message from their culture, they get socially conditioned that the manly part of them or the masculine part of them is their thinking part, which is this 3-year-old. And so sometimes they can put outsized expectations on this part of their personality because of a misinformed message they got from the world, and also the harmony process itself doesn't make this any easier. If the social conditioning that you see around you, well, that's how a man is expected, the expectation is expected to show up. Oh man, so I need to put more effort and weight on this part of me that maybe you have a lot of uncertainty around as an ESFJ, wired that way. And then you do all this contortion and all this heavy expectation for a part of you that was never intended to have that kind of expectation. It is a deeply important part of you, and it is helping you think and do all these things, but it is not the only place that you can show up meeting the other expectations that social conditioning might give you that you would like to meet. And that's for people that, men that resonate with those social messages that want to step into that. Not every man does, but the ones that do sometimes have a hard time and they feel really bad about themselves and they erode self-love because they think they have to do it in the way that society is conditioning specifically.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make that comment that if that is you, give yourself permission to express yourself as a man in the way that makes sense for you, that puts you on the footing that allows you to show up in an honest way, not in the way that you've been conditioned to, in these stereotypes of what that means.
Yeah.
And I think that you can definitely express masculine and manly in those ways, but don't let also images of other men maybe that, I gotta have to do it the way that this guy that I know did it and all of that. I just think that's an important message for particularly ESFJ men.
Yeah, well, because extroverted feeling or harmony picks up on social cues so easily.
Yeah.
And it feels a sense of responsibility to some of those social cues. And yet there is a lot of masculinity that can be represented in extroverted feeling or harmony.
Absolutely.
And doesn't need the thinking function to like somehow complete it in its masculinity.
That's right.
I think that's a great thing to mention. So if we go to what can't be expected, then what should not be a part of the expectation is rapid fire analytical or logical analysis. Like you can expect yourself to be a person who can think things through, but it's going to build on itself. It's going to be something that needs some time to really think through, because you're not spending as much free time building like sort of you could almost call it the pre-wiring or the neuro the synaptic wiring to very quickly suss something out on a logical basis.
So it's not the ability to process or think something through. You're talking about the speed of it, almost like what they measure IQ in and how fast, not just getting the right answer, but how fast you get the answer.
Right. It's one of those things where like it's kind of like if a person is an early responder, then when something happens around them, they're almost instantaneously jumping up and attending to it because they have the muscle memory for it.
Yeah.
But if somebody is not an early responder and an emergency happens,
it takes a minute to orientate,
right? And go, and they might do beautifully, right? They might do perfectly well, but they're not the early responder. And so because this function is at the 3-year-old or in the 3-year-old position, you have all of the ability to do it. You just might not have the muscle memory to do it as quickly as somebody who, say, has this as their driver function.
Yep.
So kind of giving yourself a little bit of time to process things, right? A little bit of, like not expecting yourself to have the answer immediately. It takes a second, and that's perfectly acceptable. So just take that as a reasonable expectation. Also, you can manage overthinking, but what you can't manage is that you will always question yourself here. Part of the expectation is that it is an uncertain function. So, making it an integrated part of who you are, like integrating it into the rest of your personality, which is very important to do, doesn't mean getting to a point where you feel like you've mastered it and it no longer makes you question yourself. It actually means that you have to expand your comfort zone to include some uncertainty in it. So, if you share your opinion and it's crickets, right, and nobody says anything and they just move on, that moment of like, oh gosh, did I say the wrong thing, right? Or does everybody hate me now?
Or did I just sound stupid?
Did I just sound stupid?
Question mark. I'm not certain. Was that dumb? What I just said?
Was I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Did everybody take it that I was being rude? Right? That's the other side. It might not be I'm dumb. It might be that I'm rude. Right?
All these.
Right. That those questions will never go away. You just have to make space for them, and just go. Well, I guess if I was, somebody will let me know. Right? Like that, or I can ask later. But it's not a moment of like, oh gosh, now I have to beat myself up for it. Now I have to get insecure about it. Oh, everybody thinks I'm so stupid, or everybody thinks I'm so rude, or everybody, it's like just calm the chaos down. Like understand that question doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means you're uncertain. It's not a red flag. So that's part of the expectation setting, is that there's always going to just be a little bit of that in there. The other is, and to your point, Joel, talking about maybe men who have ESFJ preferences, don't neglect your driver in behalf of this function, this 3-year-old function, because you think that the world values it more. Like, don't neglect your natural talent for emotional intelligence in behalf of some sort of analytic intelligence. If you think that's what you might have been raised in, maybe a family that really valued it. So it's just not going to work out for you if you overvalue this part. If you think this is what the criteria you're supposed to be making all your decisions from, give yourself permission to have it be part of your decision making, part of the process. But at the end of the day, it's really your driver that should be choosing, right? It should be extroverted feeling or harmony with this part. Now, if you bring them together, what you'll have somebody who has a lot of emotional intelligence, has been creating these high expectations for understanding how to develop the best relationships, the highest quality relationships, really in a place where you are doing conflict resolution and that you are making sure that you're anticipating what, like a group needs, while at the same time staying true to your own opinions, what makes sense to you, and and things that are true for you, right? Like being radically honest, at least with yourself. So it is reasonable that you can be honest with yourself, that you can own things, you can own mistakes. It's not reasonable to believe that you will always be handling this part of yourself perfectly, and that it can be a primary decision-making function. It just needs to beautify your driver function of feeling. And there's a perfectionist streak that most FJ personality types have. And it's because they're not sure what to do with this part of who they are when it gets real pedantic. And you used a word before that is perfect. You said it's an auditor. And that's what it's doing. It's seeking areas and opportunities for improvement. It's a calibrative part of you. And it's depersonalized. So when you have these questions come up, right? Did I sound stupid? That's not as good of a question as you could be asking. It's not whether or not other people think you sounded stupid. It's whether or not what you just said makes sense to you, and if there's any way that you could maybe think a little bit longer on it. What part of that argument or what part of that opinion that I just shared, what part of it is something I haven't thought through yet? Right? That's what that auditor is doing, is going, are you sure you thought this all the way through? Are you sure you have the receipts for this? Are you sure that's your opinion? That's okay that it's asking that question. Just counter it with either, no, I've thought a lot about this, or no, I probably do need to think a little bit more about this. And that's okay. It's totally fine. So allow it to audit, but not critique. Allow it to be something that helps calibrate, but doesn't become a perfectionist and demoralize you.
Yeah. Anything else on the 3-year-old before we move on to the lesson we can all learn?
Just that you can, just like you have that spinning coin concept with the co-pilot and 10-year-old, the same transcendent abilities are available in the driver and the 3-year-old. And one of the ways you'll see these two, these two functions really creating transcendence is when the ESFJ gets a little bit more honest, doesn't rely on things like being passive aggressive, like they're direct. They really do have a good finger on the pulse of their boundaries. There's just that sense of seasoning that comes from an ESFJ that really has integrated this part of who they are and created that spinning coin of keeping your finger on the tabs of the people in your life, your relationships, culture, how everybody's doing, while at the same time checking in with yourself, how what you think about things, making sure you're being true to what's honest for you, and then communicating those truths when the situation would be improved by it.
Okay, so let's tune into the rest of all of us, all the rest of us, that's a better way to say it, the other 15 types that aren't ESFJ, and tuning into what we can take away from the ESFJ that has these things in proper balance, that has created the expectations, high expectations for the driver co-pilot, proper expectations for the backseat of their car. So again, just to quickly review, because it's been a while, we've been talking about this for a minute. We looked at the ESFJ Owner's Manual for Personality that we have available for all types, but we looked at that one specifically over at personalityhacker.com. We took the car model of personality and we pulled that out, and we used that as a framework to look at the cognitive functions, the mental processes that ESFJs use, and which are driver of extroverted feeling or harmony, co-pilot of introverted sensing or memory, 10-year-old of extroverted intuition or exploration, and 3-year-old of introverted thinking or accuracy. These are the cognitive processes running in an ESFJ's mind, in their personality. And that's what ESFJ points to, all of that. So we talked about the proper expectations, the driver and co-pilot, high expectations. You can do more than you're probably doing, and you have higher capacity. Go ahead and expect that from yourself. See if you can rise to the occasion, develop those parts.
Well, and I don't know if we made this clear, but it's not one of those things you eventually achieve and you go, okay, I developed those functions, so I'm done.
Yeah.
The expectation is actually that there's no end to developing it.
Lifetime.
You're always having those high expectations of yourself because you know you can always be picking up all of the experiences and the wisdom that you're constantly, you're constantly going through life and picking up new wisdom. And then you can put it back and recycle it back into those functions and do even better.
So you're not disappointed with yourself. You have a good relationship with yourself. You don't have disappointment because you're setting expectations, ever increasing them, rising to them, watching yourself overcome obstacles and increase your capacity. And you're like, you know what? That's a channel of self-love. So you open up that channel of self-love. Now, in the backseat, the 10-year-old and 3-year-old, you have proper expectations, reasonable expectations. These are more uncertain parts of yourself. So if you have high expectations and you don't meet them, well, you're going to erode the channel for self-love, right? This channel of self-love is, it's the relationship with yourself allows that love to be passed back and forth. And so having proper expectations here puts you in a place where you're like, you know what? I can handle these things. I'm not expecting too much. I'm doing what I can do at the level that I can do it. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that also opens up a channel for self-love.
Yeah. You don't get demoralized, right? By going like, I'll never get this. And it's like, don't worry. All of us have one of those.
Yeah.
We're like, I'll never get this.
So as we tune into that, Antonia, we look at the car model from the ESFJ Owner's Manual and we look at the functions. What's a principle? If an ESFJ has all these things in place and they're balanced and they're doing this and I look at them, what's something I'm going to observe? What's a behavior or a way that they show up to the world that I can learn from as we talk about ESFJ self-love?
Yeah. So the phrase I've chosen for this type and the lesson we can all learn when we see an ESFJ that has unlocked how to show themselves love in the way that we're talking about. So they are a well-developed version. They are a version that doesn't judge neutral things, right? Doesn't hold too tightly to things that are maybe battles that shouldn't be picked, while at the same time making sure that they set clear boundaries and, fight the battles that are important. There's a sense of discretion. There's a sense of, that continuity, that responsibility, that routine with enough spontaneous fun and ability to be adaptable, to make life a little more interesting. And at the same time, They've discovered how to be honest with themselves. They've discovered the importance of giving themselves permission to have their own opinion, even if it's different from everybody else. The ability to own the things they need to own without it turning into, like a self lashing, session of just like beating yourself up. They've let go of perfectionism. They've let go of this need to be perfect or to be the ultimate in everything. They're just who they are, right? And they show up with their gifts and they do the best they can, and they have a network of amazing people in their life and wonderful relationships, and they're grounded, and they just really they're very self-possessed. So the words I'm using to describe an ESFJ like that is a thoughtful shepherd, because there's a shepherding component to particularly extroverted feeling or harmony. It makes sure that everybody's okay, and it considers not just what everybody needs, but it sort of gathers people together and points them in the direction of what needs to happen. And so there's a lot of leadership wrapped into that. But when they get to that point of showing themselves love, then they don't mind it taking a little longer. They don't mind needing to be patient. They don't mind that there are things that might get in the way, and that they've watched themselves overcome obstacles. And so they can do it with some thoughtfulness. They can lead people with a sense of maturity. And again, not pick battles that are unnecessary. There's discretion that comes in here that allows them to, even what they're shepherding is their own little family, right? They're able to help guide them to where they need to go. That's in everybody's best interest.
I like laden in that concept is your flock, meaning where your edges are. Kind of that concept we go all the way back to the very beginning of like, well, I have the availability to friend everybody on the planet. It's like, that's not all your flock. A shepherd knows who, like who's in their social group or circle. They understand that, and they have parameters around that. Not everybody is your flock. Not everybody's with you in this. It's judicious. So I think laden in that is also that concept. If you're an ESFJ, by the way, I cannot recommend more the owner's manual for ESFJs. And if you're any other type, we have one for all the types. We go into this CAR model we just use as a framework for self-love. We go way deeper into all the different concepts, the things that will hijack your mind, the things that will stop you, block you. We give you tools for getting to flow, how to grow that memory, like more specifics on how to grow that memory co-pilot, or if you're a different type, how to grow your co-pilot. I think the owner's manual for ESFJs is a fantastic place to start. And if you haven't gotten that yet at personalityhacker.com, I think that's probably the place you should start next. I think that's the really good starting point for ESFJs in a personal growth, tuning to relationships, career, and your own identity and self-love concepts. One important thing to remember as we wrap this up is to remember love is freely given. I don't believe it has conditions on it. I think relationships have conditions on them. The relationship dynamic has conditions, but love itself does not. That is freely given. And again, a good relationship with self is just like a good relationship with another person. You can send and receive love in a good relationship, also with the self. The second thing is love is a verb, meaning you don't think about loving yourself. You don't just abstract have it as a concept. It requires action and behavior to express love. Just like in a relationship, if your partner, a romantic relationship or even friendship, if your partner or a friend never did anything with you, you never went on dates or friendship, lunches, or did activities together, or they never gave you a gift or never said any words to you or wrote you a card, or they never expressed anything to you, you'd be like, I'm not in a relationship with this person and they probably aren't sending me love. So they do things to show you that. So the same goes for the self. If you want to show yourself love, that requires action and behavior. True learning, true growth equals behavior change. And so finding ways to actually show yourself love through demonstration is extremely important. And I just want to leave you with that last thought to say that's where the rubber hits the road. And we believe that attuning to grow your personality is one of the best steps to do that. That is actually doing something. You're actually growing, you're understanding how your mind works, and you're growing parts of yourself. And we think that's actually addressing this directly as love as a verb.
I totally agree.
So let's wrap this up.
Okay.
I guess that's where I say I'm in a real chill vibe also. I'm like, woo, real relax. What do you think? So we've had 2 microphones here. If you're a long-term listener, you always hear me say at the end of an episode, you don't have a third microphone, but we do want to hear from you. Come over to personalityhacker.com come over to personalhacker.com. You have 2 assignments. One, get the ESFJ owner's manual for your type or whatever type you are. Second assignment is leave a comment, question, or more importantly, your story about some of the things that might be coming up for you as we talk. Stories are compressed experiences. We get to know you more, and you can keep the conversation going with us. As more people tune in, we can keep this going and understand each other even more. So come over to personalhacker.com, get your owner's manual, and make your voice heard.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, it helps us out a lot, and I would be very appreciative. You might be watching us on YouTube since we have a video podcast now. You can like, subscribe, and hit the bell to let you know when future episodes come out. And you can also leave a comment under this episode on YouTube. You should also strongly consider joining our Personality Hacker Plus program. You can talk to other like-minded individuals about portions of the podcast. And it's a great little community that's growing. So we want to invite you to come over. I believe, what's the URL on that one? Personality, well, I probably shouldn't say it because this is forever.
Well, personalhacker.com, I think at the time of this recording is /membership is a place to go tune to that.
But if it's like 2050 and you're listening to this podcast way in the future, then it probably isn't there anymore. But
we might be dead and
yeah.
You know, this has like all been AI'd into some other
yeah.
hologram of us at
That's
some
right.
point.
It could be holograms of us. That's interesting. And that URL may or may not work. But for the time being,
Well,
personallyhacker.com /membership.
Will there be URLs that far into the future? Who knows?
Don't know.
Who knows how things will
I
end up?
guess somebody will find out. It may or may not be us.
Well, send us a postcard from the future and let us know.
If that technology is available.
If you're able to, we'd love to know whoever's in the future.
But see, a postcard did not just show up.
Yeah, that's true. We'd be like, wait, where'd this card come from on our table?
Wouldn't that have been incredible had we said that and then all of a sudden a postcard wand?
I would be changing a lot of things about my life if that.
So many things.
If that just happened, I'd be like, okay, I got to reevaluate everything. All right. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.